but we have made some cuts that will impact others whose ministries we do support. There are no staff salary increases in the proposed budget. There is, however, a staff compensation pool. That's a very interesting term. They aren't building anything. A staff compensation pool of $20,000 that is available to the conference minister and the board of directors that will provide funds if any salary adjustments are thought to be necessary. We are still living into our new staffing structures, and we also anticipate transitions in 2013, so this amount is provided to allow flexibility in that staffing. We are grateful to our staff. We know that with the reductions, our staff, both ministerial and support staff, are working harder to provide services to all of us. We have reduced our national OCWM giving by about 3% after raising it that amount for 2012. So the amount to the National United Church of Christ is the same as what we had budgeted in 2011. I would also note note for you that when we have a surplus at the end of a year, the board has made National OCWM its first priority for allocating that surplus. We have a goal of providing 15% of the budget for United Church Camps Incorporated, UCCI, and honestly, we have yet to attain that level. UCCI remains at the 2012 level, and while we are not able at this time to quite make the 15% support of our camping program, it is important to note that the UCCI portion of our budget is an ever-increasing percentage of our total budget. We want and need to support our camps and their terrific ministries. With that background, then, here is the expense portion of the budget, and slides will go along with these as well. Conference leadership and support of wider church mission partners. This first area of our budget provides for overall leadership, vision, and administration for our conference ministries, as well as fulfilling our commitment to mission partners in the national setting of the United Church of Christ, ecumenical connections through the Wisconsin Council of Churches, and the ministries of our UCC Health and Human Service and educational partners. It includes the conference minister and support functions. National setting of the United Church of Christ, $430,000. Health and Human Service partners, $56,808. The Wisconsin Council of Churches, $35,300. Chicago United and Eden Seminaries, Q, Campus Ministries, and Lakeland, Northland, and Elmhurst Colleges, $159,842. Salaries and benefits, $124,508. Travel, $18,564. Communications, $33,126, and other administrative and fixed costs coming to $132,412. The total in this particular area, $990,560, or 49.2% of the total mission of our conference. The second expense area is networks of clergy support. Our mission statement calls on us to provide networks of pastoral support, to provide encouragement and support to our pastoral leaders. This area includes significant new initiatives in developing intentional clergy colleague groups for 2013. There are 2 associate conference ministers with primary responsibility to coordinate support of pastors, but the Associate Conference Minister for Church Development and Renewal is increasingly working in this area as well. Administering the shared cost health insurance program is included in this area too. A budget item for career development is included because we need to continue to seed this fund that allows us to match continuing education funds from congregations and pastors' contributions to encourage pastors to attend educational events. Here are the specifics for this area. Associate Conference Ministers' salaries and benefits comes to $200,005. I'm going to get this number right before I go on. $205,180. Travel, $30,592. Communications, $54,590. Support for our career development, $5,000. Other administrative and fixed costs, $162,727. The total in this area, $458,089, or 22.8% of our total mission. The next area of our budget corresponds to our mission statement's goal to engage laity in spiritual growth and leadership development. This area includes our lay academy, youth ministry, outdoor ministry, and a web-based learning community. For 2013, this area includes the salary for a part-time director of Lay Academy. Here are the specifics for this area. Salaries and benefits, $55,611. Travel, $8,291. Communications, $14,796. Programming and resources, $55,819. United Church Camps Incorporated, UCCI, $154,500. Other administrative and fixed costs, $43,563. And the total in this area, $332,580, or 16.5% of our total mission. And the final category for expenses in our program budget shows our commitment to establish and renew congregations. We were disappointed in 2012 that our new Latino congregation, La Viña del Señor, closed following the departure of their pastor. There are also transitions right now at Grace United Church of Christ in Milwaukee, founded in 2006, but we continue to support Grace, and there are several major renewal projects in partnership with local churches. We need to note that much of the funding for new church starts and renewal comes from our capital funds, Forward in Faith and With One Accord. But our staffing of these new and renewing churches requires us to provide for them in our annual budget as well. Here's this portion of how our mission unfolds for 2013. Salaries and benefits, $97,563. Travel, $14,456. Programming and resources, $4,100. Church development and renewal budget expenses, $13,000. Communications, $25,958. Other administrative and fixed costs, $76,427. And the total for this final area in our expense portion of the budget, $231,594, or 11.5% of our total mission. That's the 2013 budget. This budget represents our vision for our mission and ministry as the Wisconsin Conference in the coming year. It shows anticipated income of $2,012,824, and anticipated expenses of $2,012,824, which is a balanced budget for the coming year. I am happy to be working with our new Budget and Finance Committee. I believe that over time our work will make a difference in our stewardship and support of our ministries. We are pleased to present this budget to you. It does represent a lot of hard work on the part of our finance director, treasurer, conference minister, our committee, and your board of directors. We take our work very seriously because we believe the dollars represented in supporting our mission are entrusted to us from the local congregations of this conference and the gifts that their members also make available. We continue to be excited about our mission as a conference and for associations, and 224 congregations of the United Church of Christ in Wisconsin. We believe God is calling us to ministry in all settings where God has placed us. We believe God is still speaking, and we are eager to listen for God's fresh new word and to be guided by the Holy Spirit. We want to support the ministries of your local churches and also give you the chance to connect with other congregations and mission partners and thus extend your ministry beyond your own communities. We want to be realistic with you, but we do not want to fall into scarcity thinking. We believe God will provide us with the resources we need to be faithful together in mission. We ask you to go back to your congregations and let your church leaders know of the importance of OCWM and to be an advocate for OCWM and the ministries that they represent. We'll take questions now. The budget is before you, and that will be voted on Sunday. Well, there are microphones up now. We'll come here.
My name is John Shear, Union Congregational United Church of Christ, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I am a registered nurse. I learned early in my nursing career to recognize a hemorrhage when I saw it. And it's very painful to say, but this budget represents a very serious hemorrhage. I suspect most of our congregations are hemorrhaging in the same way. And though you haven't given us a scarcity budget, but I firmly believe that what we need is a clarion call to every congregation to meet its own budgetary needs as well as those of this organization. And I think I'm not hearing that call. I'm not blaming anybody. I've run the Every Member Canvas in our own church 3 times. And I know the potential that's there, and it's not coming, but I don't know what to do about it. But I hope some thinking in this wonderful group of people will come up with some ideas, some serious, radical ideas for stopping the hemorrhage and really starting to build what this church can accomplish.
Thank you. And over here.
Daniel Van Stranden, delegate for St. Paul's, UCC, Sheboygan. Is the total, do I have this correct? The total on page 28, the first section of the 16.5% is 332,580 and not 390,358?
That's correct. I wasn't at the right page. 16.5%.
It is
on page 28.
332,580?
3.
That's what you quoted when you gave the total previously.
Oh, yes. Is the number different? Say that again then.
332,580.
580. We'll have to check that then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Jeff Pomeranian, Emmanuel in Oshkosh. I am by no means a numbers wizard. Don't ask me to do accounting. But I do get concerned sometimes when I see certain things stick out, and I do have a question on page 30, smack dab in the middle, other revenue.
Let us find it here. Other revenue?
Page 30, middle of the...
Right in the middle.
Yep, smack dab in the middle. 2011 budget, 202,000. 2011 actual, 207,000. This year budgeted 211,000, but next year 311,000. Where is the other revenue coming from? Are you just assuming you're going to get money, or I get concerned when I see an increase of $100,000 and no explanation where you think that money might come from?
A big portion of that is because we're reporting on the program revenue just above that. Is that? That's
Tom?
the biggest portion of that, John. Yeah.
Tom?
That has not been included in the budget in the past. Rich? He has a better answer.
The 311,000 Jeff is referring to is actually a total of everything, starting with the program, insurance transfer, investment revenue. It's everything beyond the donations total above. So it includes the program revenues that are new and the common service revenue, which is an increase as well.
Right.
So you've got $1.7 million as a subtotal for total donations and $300,000 for everything else to get the $2,012,000 in revenue.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There'll be time Sunday for discussion too, if we need to, so,
Before?
yeah.
Richard said there will be time for more discussion on Sunday before the vote is finally taken. So if something occurs to you between now and then, which often happens for me, write it down and bring it with you on Sunday morning, and that will be addressed before the vote is taken.
Okay, thank you, Tom. We have, in order to stay on schedule for this afternoon, we want to move right along. We will take a short break, but there are some announcements first. Want to encourage you to at some point or another, not during the program that's coming up, but to please check out downstairs, to check the displays, the exhibits that are down there. Visit Chisholm, get your popcorn, say hi to Bookstore Bob. Don't forget your camp cookies, of course, and of course pick up your red conference bag. But relax and enjoy it. We are moving along. Sunday choir rehearsal. If you want to sing with others here for this Sunday's worship, they will be rehearsing in Bauer Hall, which is straight across in the Morehouse Room A. That's where the rehearsal will be at 4:30 today. There's a couple of events after hours. Ollie's Place is open. Worship leaders are also rehearsing at 4:30. And, you know, we're running really short on time, so you can look at those announcements. According to stay on schedule, we need to restart at 3 o'clock. I have 5 minutes till. But let's try to keep it at least to 5 minutes after, no later, to give our program time, the time that they deserve and respect. Thank you very much. We will be a 10-minute break.
Conversations, and it also is the lead agency for the President's Initiative, the White House Initiative on Interfaith Work on the UW College campus. And moderating their discussion this morning is Peter McCary, who's the Executive Director for the Middle East and Europe with the Common Global Ministries of the UCC and the Disciples of Christ. He's been in that role since 2000. You know, it's good that he's with us because he's pretty much settled all the issues of the Middle East and Europe now in his time with them and doesn't have much left to do. It's good to have Peter with us as part of our national staff and a lot of experience in the kinds of interfaith conversations that we're having. This afternoon, they'll be exploring how each of our traditions approaches sacred texts. Tonight, they will take a particular story shared by the traditions and wrestle with it and hopefully help us understand how different faith perspectives have some common ground, have some differences, but can work with those differences if they come at it with respect. Tomorrow morning, Dan Paulus from the Interfaith Youth Corps will be having a conversation about sort of what we can do individually in approaching these kinds of topics. So thank you for being with us. Peter, it's yours.
Good afternoon and greetings to all of you from the national setting of the United Church of Christ and from Global Ministries of the UCC and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you this weekend and to have anticipated it now for over a year. It was last May that David Moyer introduced to me the idea and theme of this year's annual meeting, the Abrahamic traditions and the interfaith aspect, and asked if I would be available to come and participate with you, and I was happy to accept. I want to thank David, with whom I serve on the UCC's Council for Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations, and on the UCC's UEK Forum for our relationships with churches in Germany. David, as you know, is respected and appreciated throughout the church, and it is a privilege to work with him in several areas. I'm also grateful to Phil Hasslinger and Janet Pugh for their work in organizing today's panels. And it is so good to see so many friends from previous visits to Wisconsin and other engagements with you in various settings, board members, executive council, and at the risk of singling them out, former colleagues in global ministries, Pat Tucker and Dale Bishop. Dale is also my predecessor as the Middle East executive, and maybe I'll blame him for the problems I inherited. In the first part of Jan Martel's best-selling novel, Life of Pi, the protagonist and narrator, Piscine, or Pi, recounts his formative years growing up in India, including the exploration of faith and his discovery and simultaneous practice of three different traditions: Catholic Christianity, Sufi Islam, and Hinduism. In time, Pi tells us, my religious doings went from the notice of those whom it didn't matter and who were only amused, like his brother, who suggested that he only needed to adopt Judaism in order to celebrate religious observances on 4 days out of the week, to those to whom his religious interests did matter and who were not amused. When out on a walk with his parents, all three of his mentors, the priest, the imam, and the pandit, coincidentally converge upon the family, and all three compliment Pi's parents on his exemplary practice of the respective faiths. They suggested to him that that the Hindu pandit spoke to him first and said, Piscine's piety is admirable. In these troubled times, it is good to see a boy so keen on God. We all agree on that. The imam and the priest nodded. But he can't be a Hindu, a Christian, and a Muslim. It's impossible. He must choose. When prodded by his parents, Pi responds, Gandhi said, all religions are true. I just want to love God. I just want to love God. Pi blurted out and looked down, red in the face. The three wise men pulled away with stiff, grudging smiles on their faces. That was Pi's introduction to interfaith dialogue, he tells us. This afternoon and evening, we will have an opportunity to engage in a different kind of interfaith dialogue involving these three colleagues speaking from the perspectives and wisdom of their faith traditions, all in the Abrahamic traditions. We are honored to have Charles and Carl and Othman as partners and panelists. You've already heard their bios and introductions, and you can read more about them in your program book. And you'll have a chance to engage with each of them today in these panels and in the workshops. In our first session this afternoon, Charles, then Othman, then Carl will begin by introducing the sacred and the understanding of sacred in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. As Protestant Christians, we may have certain assumptions about what is holy in these three faiths and how the sacred is understood by members of those faiths. This first session may challenge those assumptions. After we hear from Charles and Carl and Othman, we'll open the floor for dialogue and for your questions to probe the ideas that they present further. I've already suggested to them that you will be an eager audience. Without further ado, I'm pleased to turn over the microphone to Charles.
Thank you. I've chosen to concentrate my remarks particularly on Jewish sacred texts and what they are, because the understanding of that may be a little different than what you would suppose. What you know of as the sacred texts of Judaism are the Tanakh, the Bible, the scriptures. Tanakh in Hebrew, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubim, refer to the three different parts of it in Hebrew. The first part, the Torah, is of those of the greatest authority and weight. And indeed, liturgically, it is so sacred that the rules for making it and the rules for employing it in service are very, very strict. The creation of a Sefer Torah involves preparing the parchment. A specially trained scribe using special ink writes each character backwards, or the words are written backwards so as to focus attention on the text, because one mistake and you got to throw it out. The object itself is then imbued with such sanctity that you may not touch it. It's on a scroll, so you can handle the scroll parts, but the text itself may not be touched. So liturgically, you'll see Jews using a pointer, a yud, to follow the text. In a devotional focus, then, the text lives, if you will, in the tabernacle or the ark. This goes back to the Ark of the Covenant, and then replicates, or is replicated, if you will, in the temple where God enters earth in the Holy of Holies. The temple no longer exists. In some sense, at least as I would understand it, the Torah is God. It is God's word. It is, in some very literal sense, God. And so you do not touch it. And so, given the sanctity of this object, you would think that its text controls everything Jews do, and that it is the authority of authorities. And you would be wrong. Or at least you would be qualified. The Torah is the written law and enjoys all the esteem that I've just described. But alongside it is the oral law. And I want to make this point particularly for a Protestant audience that, ever since the sage Martin Luther inscribed sola scriptura into Christian consciousness, Protestants particularly read Scripture. Scripture is the authority. That's not quite how Jews read the same texts. Because alongside of the written law exists the oral law. So, what's that? Well, funny you should ask. The tradition is that when Moses came down from Sinai with the tablets, he also came down with all of the parts that the Torah does not explain. So, in Deuteronomy, for example, when the text talks about you shall put frontlets between thine eyes. So what's a frontlet? Who knows? I mean, the text doesn't explain that. Clearly, men and women should be married. How should they be married? Who knows? Text doesn't explain that either. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, if you will, that the Torah does not explain. But the oral law, the tradition, does. Now again, traditionally, for Orthodox Judaism, Moses brings this back down, and it passes from generation to generation, from Moses to Joshua, etc., etc. But the oral law as we have it is not simply a set of injunctions and interpretations. It is also a set of tales, of glosses. Later today and tomorrow, I'll give you some examples of those. sometime after the destruction of the Second Temple, and that destruction is, I think, the second great pivot of Jewish history, Sinai being the first. Basically, the religion has to be entirely reconstructed or at least reconfigured when the central basis, the ritual basis of your faith is gone. So, at the same time that Christians are beginning to ponder, what are our texts? You know, the 2nd century sees the arguments with Marcion about, the New Testament, Old Testament, how much credence do we give, etc. Jews are going through a similar process, and they come to write down what was previously the oral law. The oral law, as it is now, as we now get it, is contained in a sprawling variety of books, the centerpiece of which is the Talmud, the first part of which was redacted around the year 200, the second parts of which, commentary on that, was redacted in 2 places, in Jerusalem in the 5th century, in Babylonia in the 6th century. But beyond the Talmud, there are sets of writings, again, legal interpretations, stories, tales, all of which have some bearing on the text, on practice, and on interpretation. Now, liturgically, these works, and particularly the Talmud, are not sacrosanct. Indeed, you wouldn't see them really in a service. The Torah comes out at every service. It is read in a cycle of readings each year, and then at the end of the year, the cycle begins again. The scrolls are rolled back to the beginning with people holding them, but with gloves. The Talmud does not make any kind of liturgical appearance within the service. So if the Torah has this sacrosanct appearance, the Talmud does not. But when it comes to understanding what the Torah says, what the tradition reveals, then all of these works, which we might say collectively are the tradition. It's what Tevye is blurbing about in Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition. Well, the tradition is this, it's even more than this, but it's this library of texts which come to bear on everything that Jews do and think about. So there's an I'll just close by saying I think there's an interesting counterpoise between the sacrality of the Torah, which is still pretty authoritative. I don't mean to say that, it doesn't mean much. But it's not everything. And for some people in some places, the Talmud is even more authoritative, even though liturgically it is not sacrosanct.
Thank you very much, Charles, for that introduction to us, which I think has been very helpful. We're going to turn next to Othman, who will present for us from the Muslim perspective.
Good afternoon. It's also my pleasure to be here. I thank Phil Hesslinger and Janet Pugh and the other panelists that are here with me. It's an honor for me to be able to join you in a very nice location here. I'm sure we'd all rather be outside, but I guess we got work to do here. What I will be talking about is just a little bit of a background with regards to how members of the Muslim community understand the text of the Quran and its sacredness. I want to start off maybe a little bit more introductory remarks about the Quran, just because I think people tend to have much less information about the Quran and the Muslim faith tradition. So I want to just touch upon a few things. First, just about what the Quran is, and then I will describe in a little bit more detail how Muslims actually view the Quran itself. Muslims regarded the Quran as being the actual words of God that were revealed from God to the Prophet Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. And so Muslims regard the actual words in the Quran as being the words of God. And so it's regarded obviously as being something significant in that this is the true guidance that is coming from our Creator. And the Quran and the Hadith are actually what are called the traditions of Prophet Muhammad, are the two major sources of Islamic law, Islamic practices, and beliefs. So you have the text, which Muslims regard as being the revealed text, and then you have the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, or the Sunnah, and these are things that he said, things that he did during his lifetime, and those are regarded as being the things that Muslims will follow. The Quran is written in an Arabic language. There are obviously translations of the Quran for those who happen to speak other languages, but what is considered the Quran, if you ask someone what is the Quran, they will never give you any translation because that is not considered the Quran. The Quran is only considered to be the Arabic language Quran because that the original Arabic language are what are considered to be the words of God. Everything else is regarded as being a translation or an interpretation of the Quran. In many places, what you will find if you go to any other country, that in addition to the local language that may be used in a translated copy, oftentimes the practice has been that next to it will actually be the Arabic language as well, and the idea being that they will always regard the Arabic language as being the most significant and just understand the rest of it as a translation. The Quran was revealed, according to Muslim beliefs, in a series of installments to Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad was born in the year 570 in our common era, and he passed away in the year, I believe it was 623. He received his first revelation in the year 610 when he was approximately 40 years of age. And the first revelation that he received was the word Iqra, which means read. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read in the name of thy Lord who created. And so the focus was that this reading or this understanding, that this is something that people understand it to mean that you read, you understand, you consider, you contemplate, you accept, you meditate on what has been revealed. The Quran then was revealed over a series of approximately 23 years. It was revealed piecemeal. Oftentimes, but not always, but oftentimes there were particular events or incidents that were associated with a particular revelation. And so when scholars now do an interpretation or try to get a deeper understanding of the Quran, oftentimes what they will do is they will look at what are called asbab an-nuzul, or the reasons for revelation, because sometimes there may have been a particular incident that took place, and so people say, okay, well, how does this incident, how is it significant with regards to this particular revelation? So that's a very, very important way in which people will actually look at what may have actually been meant by a particular verse. Muslims view the Quran as obviously a source book for their faith. It has various concepts, general rules, guidance, and it is regarded as something that is valued by them, and it is the basis for how they will conduct their lives. Muslims regard the Quran as being relevant in every time and every place and every realm of life. And for that to obviously be possible, the Quran cannot just be a set of rules that apply to certain circumstances. There has to be the possibility of an interpretation that can be applied to different circumstances and different times and so forth. Now, the Muslims regard the Quran as significant, and if you go to a Muslim home, the Quran is oftentimes just as an actual book placed oftentimes on a high shelf. In some societies, they actually may wrap it in a cloth and hang it up on a wall because it's considered significant. They look at this as, these are the words of God, and we want to preserve it. We want to honor it. Sadly, because of some incidents that have taken place in the Muslim world, where the Quran has been burned, or the Quran has been Muslims have taken offense to certain things that may have taken place. Now, I'll be very clear that yes, Muslims may have found those actions offensive. However, I will tell you that most Muslims will also have found the reaction to what has taken place in many cases offensive as well. There is absolutely no reason that people should lose their lives or there would be protests and so forth to the level or to the degree of being angry about something that would take place. Again, it's important to indicate that yes, the Quran is significant because Muslims regard it as the word of God, but those particular incidents that we hear about, I don't believe are a reflection of what the majority of Muslims would regard as what is their role in preserving or honoring the Quran. And in fact, with regards to preservation, there's a specific verse in the Quran where it is said that God will ultimately be the guarantor or the preserver of the content of the Quran and not human beings themselves. I want to touch upon what some scholars have talked about with regards to the different levels of reading of the Quran itself. The first level is that people will read the Quran because it is a source of spiritual enlightenment. People will read it because they want to be able to understand their faith and to be able to be enriched in a spiritual fashion. The second level relates to what is regarded as mankind's role on earth. Muslims are regarded as the term that's used is a khalifa, or a trustee, that we are God's trustee on earth. We have the responsibility to do things on earth to make this world a better place. And so that is the second part of the reading of the Quran. So let me just touch upon those just real quickly before I end. With regards to the first portion of it, the spiritual aspect of it, Muslims believe that the Quran was revealed in a very complete and accessible form. In other words, the Quran was revealed for every individual to be able to actually read it, to study it, to contemplate it, to try to understand it. And it is highly encouraged that Muslims actually read the Quran. In fact, there is a tradition of the Prophet where it talks about how there is a benefit to just reading or reciting or listening to the verses of the Quran, even if one is not focused upon the actual message or meaning of the Quran. However, all scholars are in agreement that reading it with understanding and contemplating its meaning is much more important than just reading it without understanding or listening to it without understanding. But again, just to kind of give you an understanding of the value, that even there's a value in the recitation or the listening of the Quran. What's important, though, as I indicated, is the contemplation, the understanding, the meditation. And the stories that we have from the early companions or contemporaries of the prophet was when they would receive a revealed verse, that they would try to implement it. And that for them was more important than anything else, because they wanted to understand it and then implement exactly what it actually said. And that was a significant aspect of that. The second exhortation with regards to our role as God's trustees on earth. The Quran in many, many verses talks about how, or encourages people to read the Quran, encourages them to not just read it, but then to also contemplate on its message and to study God's creation that is sometimes discussed in the Quran itself. People are told that try to decipher the understanding of how the cosmos has come together. What is its purpose? Examine it, contemplate it, review it, observe it, understand it, embrace it. And what we're told is that if we're able to go out and understand the creation and how the creation fits together, we would have a greater understanding and appreciation of God, and it would allow us then a much better ability to go out and actually serve as God's trustees on earth by upholding the values that are mentioned in the Quran, whether the values of justice, values of peace, values of protecting environment, any particular value that you may want to focus on. These are things that, again, falls into this second understanding of serving as trustees. And so I'll leave it at that, and we'll, I guess, take more questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Othman. I think the idea of trustee probably gets going in your mind, the idea of stewardship a little bit, doesn't it? I am sure also that after these first two presentations, you are stimulated with a number of questions and are eager to begin to engage. But before we do that, we'd like to turn to Carl and ask him to present. And I believe he has some handouts that are coming around, which will supplement his presentation.